Welcome to an expansive life conversation with results architect Sande Golgart and Olympic gold medalist Joe Jacobi. Your journey to realignment from fear to freedom starts now. Live an expansive life.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Joe, so good to see you. I think
Bom dia,
especially
Sandy.
around this topic, I think you were just on your surf ski, taking in the wind and the ocean. And, to me, it's like how authentic to be living your own expansive life and then able to jump, find a place to connect and join us. So welcome. It's great to be with you again.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Sandy. Yep, just finished a great day in the waves, which we can talk about in a moment. But yeah, I'm just feeling great about the last conversation we had a week ago, and super excited to keep talking about what an expansive life looks like. I think we've got some good things to talk about today.
Yeah, I agree. So for those of you new, or welcome those of you who tuned in last week, welcome again. Joe Jacobi, two-time Olympian and gold medalist in let me make sure I get this right, it's the two-man slalom canoeing, right?
Yes, sir. You got it perfectly.
Gold medal in Barcelona, who now resides in Spain and took some time to get out in the ocean and ride some free energy, which I love. Joe and I met at a top event. That is the Outlier Project, which is run by Scott McGregor, a dear friend of both of ours, an amazing networking group. And Joe and I had the opportunity. He was one of the legends at the resort. We got some time to get out and paddle together. He was teaching me a lot about the right stroke, rhythm, kind of finding your pace. And then we started to get into this conversation about waves and accepting free energy, which I found fascinating. And we've become really good friends. We've had these conversations going on for about 6 months. And we were having so much fun doing them that we decided, why don't we open it up and share in the fun that we're having? And that's our objective, is just to open up the conversation, allow people to join in the fun, make it interactive so people can ask their own questions, and really talk about something that I think all of us kind of struggle with is there more to life? How can I get more out of life? And what are any of the secrets, without prescribing a specific plan, for simply getting more, sucking more of the marrow, out of life? So we're going to jump in, and I think today what we're going to talk about is expansive leadership and managing energies based on some of the feedback we got from last week's call. But before we jump in and start talking, and I'll turn it over to you in a second, Joe, if we can all just take a few seconds just to be present, see what's here. We all have a lot going on in our lives. Usually it's a pretty busy morning, and this is a great time to just get grounded, get present. So we'll do really quick, just like we did on the last call, invite everyone to participate or say no thank you to some quick 3 box breaths. So I'll go ahead and lead and do the count. We're going to go an inhale through the nose for 4 seconds. We're going to hold for 4 seconds and then exhale for 8. And we'll just simply do that 3 times. So if everyone wants to go, breathe in through the nose for 2, 3, 4. Hold for 2, 3, 4. And exhale for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And back with an inhale for 2, 3, 4. Hold, 3, 4. And exhale for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Last one in for 2, 3, 4. And hold, 2, 3, 4. And exhale for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now officially we can welcome everybody to the call. So Joe, we're talking about expansive leadership And in that discussion, also, the idea came up for how do you manage, all of your energies. We're all leaders in every capacity. I think the most important leader that all of us are is the leader of our own life.
Yeah.
We have partners, we have friends, communities, places where we volunteer our time, and then also, of course, some of us at work, where we're chosen or elected, or we've taken on the responsibility of leading others. And so, what are your thoughts when it comes to managing those energies, and also just what does expansive leadership mean to you?
So Sandy, this is so interesting. I think that the time on the waves today set this call up pretty well. And also, while I was walking home from the beach, I was thinking about you and your journey since we became friends just about 9 months ago. And so, one of the things that I talk about with the waves, everyone wants more free energy in their life, like that idea of being on the slope of a wave, using the energy of a force greater than us to help propel us in the direction that we want to go. And I think one of the things that's the most overlooked part of surfing better waves in life is our basic speed. It's how we manage our energy. What is the capacity of our energy? I think we get very caught up managing time. If I only had more time to do this, if I only had more time to do that. But um, I read a book in 2005 after my final Olympics called The Power of Full Engagement. The book hit me like a bolt of lightning. It was a real life changer for me. And the thesis of the book is we don't fail to do the things we want to do for lack of time. We fail to do it for the lack of energy. And Sandy, where this comes in for you, I actually remember starting to talk to you about some of your choice of exercise. And, I think when we met, you were talking a lot about basketball, explosive sports. And look at even your physical management of energy over the last 9 months. There's been a huge, huge shift towards that idea of basic speed, of expanding your capacity. And the whole thing about basic speed relative to accumulating the free energy of a wave, whether it's in the sea or in life, the better your basic speed is, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, the better, the stronger, the faster, the steeper the wave is that you can catch. It makes more waves possible for you. I think one of the hardest things for me to see about this idea of managing energy over time is watching people try to just surf waves that is just way outside of the zone of their basic speed. And I love that I was thinking about this on the way home, but really specifically thinking about your journey, Sandy. And maybe that might be interesting to talk about with some of the physical journeys you've taken on and how you've really managed your energy over time in the last 9 months.
And, for me, part of what Joe is talking about, I was a basketball player. I played at the University of Colorado. I won the National Slam Dunk Contest back in 1990. We won't go all the way back there. And then I was a track and field, I guess you could say, star. I was actually better at track and field than I was basketball. It just wasn't a place where you got full scholarship, so I didn't really pursue it. But I was a field event guy. Didn't like running, didn't like expending a ton of energy. I was a quick burst athlete, and I high jumped 7'1", set a state record that still stands today, and won state in the high jump. And in that, I sort of latched onto this identity of being a quick burst athlete. And I started to judge, because it wasn't me, other people were doing these expansive things like running marathons, running these big endurance events. And I would hear their stories and hear them talk about losing toenails and their bodies being crushed. And I just got this visceral reaction and started, for lack of a better word, hating endurance events. And I think as my awareness increased, I started to pay attention to these conversations I was having in my head. And one of them was, where did that come from? I realized that I'd never tried one. but I was sure judging it, really hard. And I joined one of Jesse Itzler's groups, the Adventure Club, and just set out to try and experience these endurance events. But with that, I had this feeling that I really needed to set an intention not to just do it, because I've already resolved the fact that I'm enough. I don't have to go prove anything. I know that I have like vitality, like pouring through my body if I allow it, and I clear energy and I make room. I knew I could do the event. I didn't have to prove anything to myself. I wanted to see, I find a way to take every step joyfully. And that led me to a better relationship with time, a better relationship with being fully present. And then I started to train, and I started to train with intention, awareness, and I could see, okay, if I'm going to go 44 miles in the Grand Canyon, I'm going to have to learn to up my basic speed. To do that, I could feel in my body. I'm going to have to work some bigger muscles and not rely on my calves and my feet, but really work to engage, like my glutes and other things that can carry you for 44 miles. And then we did, of course, the event in Sun Valley, 29029, where you have 36 hours to hike the equivalent elevation of Mount Everest, 29,029 feet. And there again, I was just surprised at how it wasn't easy, but how I was able to do that, let energy flow through me, be fully present, complete it, and not be sore, and turn around and drive home 11 hours in my car, after the event. And we've been talking along that journey, and it's been a massive transformation for me. And I think one of the keys for me is because I had the awareness that I wanted to take every step joyfully, I paid attention to all the signs. I was totally open to allowing help wherever I could get it. And one of the biggest places I found help was in Bali. I was with a meditation guru back in the jungle who taught me how to meditate, go into my body, clear out any blockages, and allow energy to flow through me. And anytime I found resistance or I found things getting quote unquote hard, rather than judge it, I just took a deep breath. I followed it through to my heart. I opened my heart and let it smile. And I still use that every day. I can't believe how much energy flows through you when your heart is smiling.
Amazing. I feel like I've had a front row seat to watching this transformation, because I think even at last fall, you had not kind of taken on those commitments yet. And I think I felt like you were a little bit more in that explosive speed, explosiveness mindset. And it's been an incredible change. Like, I'm watching I don't want to make too much about the accomplishment, but really the energy come to you. It's like you've put yourself in a place to really let what's going to work for you come to you. And it's like there's so little force there. And by the way, when you were talking about hitting certain ages and being able to dunk a basketball, like that feels like actually you going to actually try to do something. Whereas I feel like all these other things that you've been doing has been much more process of letting the world come to you. And I know that you're only a few months into that, from where you were last autumn. Like, I can't wait to see where this is going.
Yeah, me too. I'm actually, I was doing a training run yesterday for a marathon, but there's an opportunity to do a 50K at the same event. And I could really feel this kind of indecision. And I was going to open it up on social media and let people vote, like, should I do a marathon or 50K? Because I really think the importance of setting the intention, it allows you to align to something specific that you really want to go for. And without that alignment and full commitment, it's just too hard to negotiate, with yourself. So I'm looking forward, to seeing that event, and I'm inching towards committing to that 50K, which I've never run more than a half marathon.
I don't have too much advice. I've run the marathon, but never like a step more. I've run the marathon a few times, but yeah, I've just come around on this point, and in that I'm really trying to choose things that I think that I'll enjoy. I think one of the things that came to mind as I was surfing waves today, so I sort of want to step back a little bit also from the energy management situation, because, you know, we're living in a world where we can see a lot of big accomplishments being done today. And I want to just tell you a little bit what the sea was like today. There
Yeah.
was a lot of wind in on the Mediterranean today, and the waves were actually really, really big. And it was one of those days, you know, sometimes it's great to have big waves, but when there's space between the waves get a little bit more speed and they're harder to catch. And I've learned this lesson before. This is a little bit of an evolution. The first time Maria and I were in waves like this, we just thought there was something wrong with us, that we couldn't catch these waves. Like, we didn't have enough basic speed, but these waves look so big and beautiful and perfect. Like everything else we see on social media, everything looks so big and beautiful and perfect. And like, what's wrong with us that we can't catch these waves? And today it was so easy to see, you know, not which waves to catch, but which waves to let pass me by, and actually really work on some smaller waves that actually led to some surfs on some bigger waves. And I think I can see my own surfing coming a long way, but I just sort of, I draw a parallel between those big, beautiful waves that you see out there, and you think there's something wrong with you that you can't catch those waves. Sandy, they're moving really fast, you know, and if you don't have a lot of speed and have enough power to you know, to match the slope of those waves, you're never going to catch it. And there's a lot of dynamics about the waves that can change that make the waves easier to catch, but we don't get to choose the conditions. We only get to respond to what those conditions are. But within every condition, I think when you get over this idea of like, okay, today that maybe the biggest waves aren't for me, pick some smaller ones. You know, there's a really good surf ski paddler from South Africa who likes to say, the small waves lead to the big waves. And I got to tell you, the small waves are so much easier to catch, and they have real free energy on them as well. And once you get some momentum going on the smaller waves and you link a few, you find yourself surfing the best waves in the sea when it's your time. But I just want to draw that parallel to the world we're living in. If you scroll on social media a little bit, everything looks like what everyone else is doing is like so much bigger and better and more than what you are. And it's just not the case. You know, we need to choose what is best for us, and then really start to deploy some really good energy management skills and techniques that will help us accumulate the free energy that we want in the goals that matter most to us.
Yeah, I love that. I think, and we'll tie this to expansive leadership of teams for those of you tuning in to talk more about that. But before we get there, I've shared this story with you before, Joe, but I was in Costa Rica surfing. I had the same experience. I was just getting crushed. And I had this feeling that I'm just not enough. I was so broken, getting hammered and thinking, this is up to me. I need to surf like a verb. I need to somehow find the way to get in there and do it. And I got this sensation that came over me just about the time I was ready to paddle in and just call it a day, that came over me. And you've probably all felt this from time to time, but it was hearing, although there wasn't a sound, but you could feel it I could feel it in my body. It just said, hey, just accept the wave. We're doing all the work. Just stand up. And it was this big relief, and it was kind of that feeling of, man, I am enough. This wave, all I have to do is stand up. It's doing all the work. It's not up to me. I stood up on the next wave, and I took it all the way in, and I stayed out there and caught another dozen waves without any effort at all. And it was just kind of showing me back that you don't always have to be this warrior type that is doing everything. Sometimes if you just pay attention to the free energy that's available to you, you surrender to it and you just learn to accept it and ride it, you can have the most amazing time, of your life.
I love that. I think that so often those waves that you're talking about, where the acceptance happens, can also be a little bit closer to the shore too. I mean, it doesn't matter whether the wave is already broken and you have that foam pile there that is real energy. Like you can learn so much, you can have so much fun doing that. And I think that even I think back to a lot of the river training that I did in my canoeing life many years ago. I think are always surprised like how much training that we do in smaller and calm water for actually performing in really big, hard whitewater river rapids. And the whole idea about this kind of practice, and I think it's so relevant to expansive life, to the management of energy, and expansive leadership as well, is that, if you want to do big things, it's not about just going out and practicing the big things in a big way. It's actually trying to find better ways to practice the smaller fundamentals over and over again in a more controlled environment where you can evaluate technique, you can make corrections, you can practice perfect technique with less fear, less risk of getting hurt. I don't know what percentage of our training in whitewater canoeing was done on small and flat water, but towards the end of my career, I mean, more than 50% of training for whitewater canoe slalom, for winning a gold medal in the Olympic Games on hard whitewater river rapids, is actually done in really smaller, easier, controlled environment kind of water. You're not going to paddle with perfect technique in really hard circumstances. But if you go into flat water, you can take a perfect forward stroke every time. And it's always the question I like to ask people. So what is your flat water? What does that look like? Where do you go to practice, better technique in a controlled environment where you can get curious and make improvements, and you can apply this to your life in a physical way, in a mental way, emotional way, and spiritual way, because we are just talking about energy now.
Right. Yeah. Well, I feel like this is a perfect segue to getting into talking about leadership.
Let's do it.
The things that you're talking about, to me, what's here for me is that there's that thought of everyone is enough from the place that they are. But as a leader, you really have to help your teams fall in love with the process. So often we get so focused on the big wave, the big result, the quarterly numbers, the monthly numbers, and we're putting interference in the way by saying we have to get this done by this date to call it a success. What you're talking about, to me, is falling in love with the process. I am amazed. I've been very blessed to be around a number of professional athletes, whether it's football, basketball, golf. Every one of them spends a disproportionate amount of time, as you're saying, on the process of the most basic things you can ever imagine that you would think professional athletes don't even waste their time with anymore. Like that was for the YMCA when they were 7 or 8 years old. But here they are at the top of their game, and they're still focused on the basics and getting the basics right. And they have fallen in love with taking their steps joyfully in preparation of that big moment where they can't afford to think about the basics. It has to be so repetitive that instincts take over, and they use those basic, fundamentals when it matters most, so that when that big wave is there, the opportunity arises, your preparation's ready to meet that big opportunity, which is what a lot of people call luck.
One of the things that I've found in my coaching practice with leaders, especially with sales leaders, is everyone loves sport analogies. And I think sport works well with sales, but I think one place it's actually really hard that we really have to bring a little bit of context to. I developed a model which I'm happy to share with people that are interested afterwards. It's called the performance triangle, and the performance triangle is like, if you just imagine like a triangle with 3 points. There's game time, there's practice time, and then there's recovery time in the 3 points of the triangles. And then the triangle within the triangle has 3 levels. The lowest level is training to train. The middle level is training to compete, and the highest peak is training to win. And I think in sport, whether it's Division I basketball or Olympic canoeing, I think one of the things that's really different than sales and sales leadership is that athletes and sports have a lot of time to practice for very little game time. Like, we have a lot more practice time than game time. Whereas in sales, they're like in game time mode all the time with very little time to practice. And so one of the things that I'm always after, in the world of expansive leadership, is how to open the conversation with leaders is, number one, with what little time that you have to practice when you're in sales. How are you going to practice? What are you going to practice? And why are you going to practice it? So you got to get really intentional about what you're going to do. And then secondly, that how to expand the amount of practice time by a little bit. And by the way, making more sales calls is not practice. Like, sales calls is game time. If you're talking to a potential prospect, that is game time. But I think doing role play and doing sales coaching, that is practice time. And I think making more time to do that pays itself off huge dividends in the long run. And it's so counterintuitive, because all most sales leaders are taught to think is, how to get my team to the finish line? How do I sort of just get them to hit the goal as quickly as possible? And that does nothing to develop them as people. It does nothing to develop them as a group, as a team, as an organization. And I think it is just, it's so overlooked. And I hope one thing that comes from these conversations is that it gets people rethinking about how they are looking to develop their people, their team, as people. And I mean, when you really think about the opportunity in front of us in our life here, isn't that what this is all about? The development of humans.
For me is all about relationships. And if you boil the word relationships down, it's really about how we relate to things, to people, to circumstances. And when you're managing a team and you're leading a team, one of the things I think that gets so overlooked, because we're so focused on the goal, the timeline, and quote unquote winning. So we're automatically jumping to the top of your pyramid, right? Without really building the foundation to get there. And then we're wondering, how did this person that I interviewed that was so talented enough for me to make an offer, pour in the time to get them ready and onboarded, and now I'm jumping to the top of the pyramid and I'm asking, why aren't you winning? And I think how you relate to your teams, if you understand that every person on your team, you hand selected or you were hand selected to lead them. They are unbelievable spiritual human beings having this material experience, capable of anything and everything, if you are willing to meet them where they need to be met and start them on that process of getting them, while understanding they have their own version of reality from their own perspective. They have their own things that they've been through. They have a conversation going on in their head that's usually limiting. And if you can hold space for them and really get to know them, understand where they're at, introduce them to some of that whitewater wash, let them build some momentum, teach them how to then go out and catch a slightly bigger wave, prepare them for the big wave that when it comes, they're ready not only to play, not only to compete, but to win. You'll bring your team along by not jumping to the top of the pyramid with expectations too early, and really find a way to introduce them to a process that allows them to fall in love with every single step and take that step joyfully. And lastly, then understand, right now, if you look at all the studies coming out, there's so much, quiet quitting. There are people totally disengaged with their work. I think the overall job satisfaction, I don't know this to be true, but it feels like it's at an all-time low. And it's because of this lack of the ability to relate to where people are at, recognize that they are enough, and help them, again, fall in love with the process, of getting there. And as the leader, then knowing, of course, we want to get to a place where we're going to be winning our fair share of these events, but I'm going to help you, get there. And then you finally understand, and this is something that I learned in the last 6 months that has changed my whole life, my whole perspective, and that is people don't fall in love with you. People don't fall in love with their job. People don't fall in love with circumstances. What they fall in love with, and this would be the one thing I would say would be a great thing to write down and really think about throughout the rest of the week. They fall in love with the version of themselves that they get to be when they're in your presence. As a father, as a spouse, as a leader, what version of themselves do they get to be because you're providing them with the safety, the recognition, and the understanding that they are enough exactly the way that they are. There's nothing wrong with them. And then you can take the time to really invest, allow them to fall in love with the process. Then they will start to fall in love with the version of themselves that they get to be by working at your company. And then magically they're in love, or they think they're in love, with the opportunity that they have in front of them. And that's where they pick up. That's where the heart is open, energy's flowing through them, and now they get to manage a bigger energy where their results are going to skyrocket.
Sande, the idea of putting people in a position to fall in love, like, let's talk about that for a moment in terms of expansive leadership. And I'll actually pose it to you as a question first, and then I'll share a few thoughts. So what conditions need to be present if you're a leader, if you're an expansive leader? What conditions need to be present to help your people fall in love in the way that you're talking about? What conditions need to be present for that to happen?
I think talking about this from the leader's point of view, the leader has to have the awareness to know that every one of us humans, unless you've reached full state of consciousness, you're coming from a place of past hurt and future fear. All of us are operating to some degree with fear that I might not be enough. I might not make the team. I might not meet your expectations. And when you can help them to be seen and heard and feel safe, you've now created an amazing foundation for them to start showing up differently. If I don't have to worry, I don't have to be in a constant state of stress. And maybe maybe our next call, we can show the graph that we put together about living below the line where I'm in a state of fight or flight, stress, the known, controlling, versus this expansive way of living, of getting rid of fear, knowing that you're always being promoted and protected, and there is nothing to fear. There are only these opportunities to learn and improve yourself if you get to that state. Now they're free to be their best version of themselves. To me, that's the number one ingredient. But what I see, so a lot of people will say that, what I see in action are leaders who are so desperate for results, they've moved too quickly to a state of manipulation, and they're instilling fear. They're reiterating that their team isn't enough. They have to get better. They have to change. Let me correct what you're doing. They're always talking, and their vocabulary, their verbs, and the vibration of the way they talk to their team is constantly reinforcing they're not enough, which instills this really weird belief that I have to do more, I'm not enough. And that to me is the recipe for where you're not going to achieve those very expansive results. You're not going to appreciate the way you want to appreciate because you're not appreciating.
You mentioned stress and tension a few times. That's what comes up for me. And I think when we're trying to pin ourselves at the top of that pyramid, in game time, training to win all the time. It's too much stress. It's too much tension. I know for a fact the best athletes in the world don't perform like that. I mean, the whole idea of being at the top of the pyramid, you're designed to be there for a short period of time, whether you're in sales or whether you're playing basketball, whether you're canoeing, whether you're a solopreneur, a creator. We all need to kind of look at our best performances, this idea of putting ourselves in a position of falling in love. Yes, we want to go up, but when we are finished with, a certain action, a certain point, a certain project we wanted to complete, the very best people come back down to the bottom of the pyramid quickly. They put themselves in a position to rest, to recover, to reset. And they realize there's a lot of good things that happen at the bottom of the pyramid and then bring themselves back up. And just to give a very quick sports analogy, I think a lot of people mistake a swimmer like Michael Phelps of why he was the fastest swimmer in the world. It was not that he was just purely the fastest swimmer in the world. What really made Michael Phelps the best was that the moment he had a chance to recover or reset his body and his mind, he did it faster and more efficiently than anyone else in the world. Whether that was swimming intervals in the actual workout, or as soon as the workout was over, that just signaled, the certain number of hours until the next time to do work again. And I think that if we want to create, as expansive leaders, better conditions for people to fall in love, that we need to let people come down from the top of the pyramid, come down from training to win, go down into training to train, go down into practice mode, go down into recovery time. And that is where you give people a real opportunity to connect with themselves, to connect with others, as you say, Sandy, to relate at a higher level, to vibrate at a higher level.
And I think this is one big takeaway for any leaders that are tasked with leading another team, is that really owning and embodying this idea that it is about your team, it's about them, giving them the space to feel safe, recognizing them and allowing them to fall in love with that version they get to be of themselves. So many leaders that I see, and I was there, like, I'm not putting myself out of that category. I spent 30 years in corporate dabbling in all of this stuff, but too often I would find myself wanting or thinking that they needed to fall in love with me as the leader. And that is such a self-centered idea, usually coming from our identity of what we think we should be, not who we really are. I recognize for myself, I'm so much more powerful as a leader by not holding myself to that standard or trying to be something that I'm not, but rather allow people to be the best version of themselves, not to fall in love with me. They might think as a leader they really like me, but they don't like me. They like the version of themselves they get to be when they're on my team. And that will take you out of this idea of manipulation, where you think you're the one driving the result and you really, are not.
Fantastic. What do you think if we open up the conversation a little bit?
Yeah.
And
It looks like we've got about, 2,000 people on different platforms joining from YouTube and others. For those that are, by joining on those platforms, the way it's set up, you're considered backstage, so we can't see you, but you can send on the chat any questions that you have, and we'll be happy to take them. And then we have some people on stage. We have Hillary and Annette. Annette, great to see you. Hillary, awesome to see you here. Just curious if either of you have any questions. I know, Hillary, we could talk golf all day long. and these things,
Absolutely.
Resonate um, to the golf course tremendously, which I get giddy about talking about. But do either of you have any questions while we see if anything comes through on the chat? Okay. Yeah, I'd love it. Exciting. You're moving up the pyramid. Yeah. He's like our Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's that voice in the background. Yeah, Hillary. I think we can all hear you just fine, Hillary, if you want to get going, and then we'll put you on stage. Yeah.
So that we're not making work projects for us, we're creating space for them to be themselves. So it always starts with let's connect it back to the heart brain coherence and the 60 times more electromagnetic field that we emit 3 to 4 feet out of our heart when we step into a room. So as leaders, if we step into a room without it, our team already senses the lack of coherence immediately. So that's number one, to the point that Sande, all that work that Joe's acknowledging you're doing, Joe, you're teaching these kids all the time that factor that we have to come in with that work and expansion already done is so key and so quietly effective. We kind of overlook that. Something that came up for me is how would you relate the undercurrent that everyone carries into the workplace, that is their own personal tide, let's call it? How would you relate to leaders in a way that helps them maybe expand and acknowledge the reality that not only is there a team undercurrent that is occurring, there's also an emotional undercurrent that's coming from every single individual at every single given moment of their life into the workspace? And how perhaps could they deal with that?
Yeah. Wow. That is such a great question. I'll start, Joe, if that's all right.
Sure.
I think that it is the awareness of the leader to understand, right? We have close to 8 billion people on the earth. It blew my mind when it finally settled into me that means there are 8 billion versions of reality. There's not just one reality, there are 8 billion versions. So what I'm perceiving when I walk in as the leader is my reality. And you have to create space, an open space to welcome in, let's say you have a team of 10, that there are 10 other versions of reality on your team alone for the exact same circumstances coming from their own perspectives. And they may have other things going on in life that you need to honor as their reality before you get into what we need to do. So I think, to me, it comes down to holding space and just recognizing, as much as we may want to jump in and jump to the top of the pyramid every morning and get on the call and say, okay, guys, we need to get X done today. It's just that little check-in. How's everyone doing? What's going on in your life? And I'll give you one other tip that I've learned from joining Peter Crohn's Freedom group. He does an amazing job building this container for people to join to just say the stuff that's going on in their life as a way to just get it off their chest and have a group that supports them to honor that their reality is what they're saying. Not to fix it, not to help change that person, to realize there are no problems. Like our job as a leader is to dissolve this misconception that there are any problems. Like one of my favorite YouTube videos that I watch probably once a week is Jocko Willink. And he's talking about how managing and leading his team, no matter what they say, his response is the same. He says, good. They say, well, we didn't get the supplies. And he goes, good. You know, it's this really motivating. If you haven't seen it, look it up on YouTube. It's a phenomenal lesson in leadership that there is no good or bad. He uses the word good, but it doesn't matter what's going on. That's reality. Let's settle in. Let's not ignore it. Let's not create stress by wishing the situation was different. Let's embrace what it is, and then let's figure it out, you know, and move forward. So I think, Hillary, for me, that heart coherence that people are going to feel is when you create the space and you just check in. It can be 5 minutes. It can be 3 box breaths to settle in, help people shed this misconception that they have any problems, but voice what feels like a real problem, something real that's happening in their life. Let the team and the leader honor it and let that sit, because if we ignore it, that person's not going to be felt seen or heard. They're not going to feel safe. They're going to feel like something's wrong with them. That's human nature. But the moment you provide that for them, you give them a container to know that, oh man, I love being here. I love knowing I can show up as the best version of myself, this perfectly flawed human existence where I have all these itchy and scratchy parts, as well as this great performer, but I can feel safe in the presence of my leader to say what's going on, know that I'm going to be seen, heard, and honored. They don't have to agree with it. They just have to honor that I understand for you, this week's going to be tough. I'm sorry to hear that you're going through what you're going through. If there's anything we could do as a group to help you, let us know. That alone, you know, I think is a really good, powerful thing for leaders to embody. Joe, I don't know what's there for you.
You know, I also love this question, Hillary. I think it's so good. For a 5-year period of my life, the only time I ever did, worked for a paycheck, I was a conventional paycheck. I was the chief executive officer of an Olympic sport organization, my Olympic sport organization, USA Canoe Kayak, and I wasn't especially very good at my work, although I got a little better at it during my time there. So I was the chief executive officer for 5 years. But what I know about my time there is that my mornings at work were manageable. My fatigue really started to catch up with me in the afternoon. And my life really started to go off the rails, not between the time I showed up to work and the time I left, but between the time I left work and the time I came back the next day. And I love what Sandy is saying. I love what you are saying. I know that it's going to take some time for leaders to get their people ready and more comfortable for these kinds of conversations. But honestly, this is why I'm doing coaching, so that people can bring their full selves to work. But it's going to take expansive leaders that allow people to bring their full selves, because we know there are some leaders out there that are saying, no, I don't want to know what's going on at home. That's your time. That's your thing. But I actually think that the future of leadership is going to be how you help people grow and develop as human, not for the 8, 9, 10 hours a day that you have them, but for the 24 hours a day that they have on the clock. And that's not going to be easy. But when we actually start to envision what that world can look like, and I say this in every coaching intake call, I tell my own story about how my life was just going off the rails, at nighttime and with sleep and with food and everything. It was just a real mess. And it was like, I'm just withdrawing money from the bank account while I was sleeping. Like, I wasn't adding money to the bank account. It was like going the opposite direction and just running myself into the ground. And again, I'm not any better for myself than I am for the people that I'm trying to lead. So I think that is giving people a way to communicate how they're going in their life. Because if you don't do that, believe me, they're going to try to, everyone's going to try to please the boss to the best of their ability. They're going to try to please the leader to the best of their ability, regardless of how sick their child is, regardless of how elderly their elderly parents are, regardless of how troubled their marriage is. They're just going to come to work and say, yeah, everything's great. Like, what can I do to help us hit our goals today? And that's not going to develop the people. But when you actually give people the opportunity to communicate that they're less than 100%, they're actually operating a bit below the line. You know what I know for a fact about humans as much as I know about athletes as well? You don't have to be feeling above the line or 100% to perform well at what you do. What you've got to be able to do is to be in a position to express your full self and feel your full self. And the leaders that figure that out are going to have an amazing time in the future than the people that keep trying to sort of be these very disciplinarian, let's move the team towards the goal. I don't care what you do on your own time, but when you're here on our time, it's our time. That is just so antiquated and behind us. But that's where I am. And this is actually the number one reason that I want to coach, is just so that people can be in a position to bring their full selves to work and to their whole life every day.
And I love that, because I think there are many people out there in leadership positions who think this is like a soft form of leadership. That, oh, if I do that, my team's going to think I'm soft, and then they're going to think they can get away with more, and the reality is they're going to give more because they can show up, and they're going to fall in love with the version of themselves they get to be as being a part, of your group. And I think there's two things here that are very important as potential takeaways, for people, and that is manipulation goes both ways. The moment the leader starts manipulating, the team manipulates back. You quickly figure out, what does my boss need to hear from me so they go away? I see this all the time in some of the least productive groups I've ever been a part of. And I've been on teams that have won national championships and finished in the basement. The difference is when you have a leader so out of touch with their team that they start to accept what they're being told. And they have opened the door to be manipulated back, where they're like, they teach their team really quick, if you say this, I'll go away. Like, oh man, I'm working, or I'll send you an email at 5 a.m. The leader's like, oh, they must be working really hard. Well, that person just figured out, if I send an email, you think I'm working, and then I'm got so much going on in my life, I can't show up, the rest of the day. But the leader thinks everything's okay. And they've now allowed and incubated this space to allow for two-way manipulation, which becomes really bad. So I think that's one. Number two, I know the one thing that kept me from being more this way when I was leading teams, for almost 3 decades, was my relationship with time wasn't that great. And I never felt like I had time, and then I'd feel stressed, and I'd show up for a call and like, guys, we only have an hour, we've got to get through this material. And then I'd jump right in and go to the top of the pyramid. And when you change your relationship with time, and this can be a far out concept, but there's only time here on earth. When we leave, there's no such thing. So it's a weird thing that we have to deal with. So we might as well embrace it and get better at how we relate to time. The one thing I know about time is there is no past and there's no future. There's only right now. And right now we may have this idea that there was a past or there is a future, but if you let your mind go there, you will create this sense of dis-ease that I don't like the way things are right now. And now you as a person, as a leader, you're in conflict, and you can get out of conflict by just raising your awareness, recognize everything that's right in front of you as exactly the way it is. It's not any different because it can't be. it's the way it is. And when you learn to embrace that, you find the beauty in that, and you're able to lead from a place where you're not so stressed, for time, worried about a future that you might not even want. You're just there and you're fully present, and that kind of allows you the space and be able to provide the space. Thank you so much, Hillary. That was an amazing question. We have one coming in from the chat from Brenda. Brenda says, my reality is our manager was trying this intermediately, tried this. It devastated my life and worse, my daughter's life. I'm not sure I fully understand the question. It could just be a comment. I might not even be seeing the whole thing. Okay.
Yeah,
We might take a stab at maybe what she's saying is having to do with consistency, right? Where you somewhat show up that way some days and not the others. And then, okay. So two-way manipulation wouldn't happen if being fully present is expected by everyone. And I think that has to start with the leader. The leader is the one that has to show up, not work from a place of manipulation, work from a place of inspiration. And when you do show up that way, the need for anybody to manipulate anyone starts to diminish, and then hopefully eventually just completely goes away. And it creates just a better life, better existence, for everybody.
I'm always thinking of, I think a lot of it in the last 10, 15 minutes, Hillary, your question, I think helps us to kind of see where we're coming from and where we would like to be. And I think in those situations, I'm always thinking in the spirit of experimentation. And if you're leading, whether you're leading yourself, whether you're leading clients, whether you're leading a team, I think it's really good to think in terms of experimentation and to think about ways to bring people along on this journey. And one of the things I talk to my own clients about, especially if you have just imagine if you have a sales team of eight people and you've never done anything like this before. I always say, start this process with a few of them and see how it goes. Bring them into the loop, see how it feels on you as a leader, see how they respond to it, and then start to build this out in subtle, small ways, and I think, Sande, you alluded to that in some of your ideas just about doing those check-ins, and it's okay. Not everyone has to say everything all the time, but I think a spirit of experimentation is really important. I think this is not one of those moves that you want to go from 0 to 100 in a day's time.
Right. Yeah, I have one last thought before we close it out, and that is sometimes you're involved with a group where the leader is just resisting showing up the way you think they should show up. And one of the most valuable things that I learned about myself and giving unconditional love to myself is that it is our responsibility as being the leader of ourselves, our corporation, to set proper boundaries and realize that anything I'm not changing, I'm choosing. So let that sink in. If you have a leader that just refuses to hold space, they refuse to accept this new way or this, I'd say, enlightened way of leading where they do actually hold space, you realize that, man, I can feel it in my body. I don't like this. I don't like what's going on. I don't like the version of myself. Maybe as Brenda was saying, with her and her daughter, then recognize that you are free with the choice to change that situation. You don't have to go 0 to 100 the next day. You don't have to raise your hand and yell out, I quit. But you can set the intention, I'm going to set a boundary. I don't like the way that I have to show up to be a part of this organization. Set the intention that I'm going to find a leader that can recognize just how unbelievably powerful I am, just the way that I am, and find a team that I want to contribute to, and set that intention and watch, and that will start to unfold in your life. and you'll start to see new opportunities because energetically you've just announced, I'm no longer willing to be treated this way. I'm going to stand up for myself. I'm going to set a boundary, and I'm going to welcome in. And one of the best words that came out of our conversation, Joe, I'm going to allow an amazing team to show up that I can pour myself into. And once you hit that, you'll be surprised at energetically what starts to come your way as you allow for that type of group. And you don't have to just show up, quit, yell, throw your computer and say, I'm out of here. Just set the intention and you'll watch it unfold. I would say within 6 months, if you really believe that, you set the boundary, you will start to see your world shift and you'll see places that you can go that will welcome you. And then you allow them the opportunity to welcome you as a new team member. So that's the last for me is, if you don't change it, just know you are choosing it, and you don't have to. So with that, Joe, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts.
Just a big thank you to Hillary and to Brenda for their questions and helping us to prompt and direct the conversation today. I love this. Sandy, just real quick, what do we got coming up next?
Yeah. So we do have a call on next Tuesday, the 15th, same time. We also have the idea of creating a container that I mentioned earlier, which could be a call where people can just show up and say, hey, here's what's going on. This is my reality. If you feel like that's not been made available to you, Joe and I talked about how important that is to provide. So if you're interested, please reach out to Joe or myself. And if we have people who want that, we're totally willing to create that space for you to show up and just say, hey, this is what's going on. There won't be any coaching, but it is a very valuable place, a safe container, not live broadcast to the world, where you can show up and say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. I just need to get this off my chest. It is an amazingly powerful space, a great opportunity for that. And we're happy to do that on Fridays. So if anyone has an interest in that, please let us know and we will set that up and send out private invitations. So it's not, we want to control that group because it'll be whatever it is, but that needs to be private. It needs to be fully supported. But we're more than happy to do that. I've experienced that, and I can only say it is a major gift when you find the people that you can share openly with what's going on in your life, and then it helps you realize that you have no problems. It allows you to change your relationship with circumstances or people to realize you have no problems.
So good. Thank you so much, Sandy.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I did wear my surf hat in your honor today. I knew you were going to be out on the waves, and I just love the conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching an Expansive Life Conversation. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next week.